Welcome to Aspirations. Today we're going to talk about eating and not eating and how it applies to energy. All right, so this conversation is all about energy, a clear mind, an energetic mind, a high-performing mind and body. That's what we're all about at Aspirations. And eating is something we do to survive. Some of us enjoy it a little more than others. But, we also use it for much more than just surviving. It gives us energy. It helps us with that clear, energetic mind, high-performing body. But how well do we know how it works? So today I've got a good friend, Cason Lehman, on. He's a functional health coach at Life Strength Health Center. He's spent the last 11 years practicing physical therapy. He wrote this awesome book called Wired to Heal. I actually met Cason at Joe Dispenza event back in 2021, which is a whole nother conversation about meditation and 5D and all of that. But today we're going to start a simpler concept, which, like I said, is eating and energy. And, Cason, all this started, when I first came to you and said, okay, I found this information on an apple and how an apple can give us energy similar to coffee, but without the crash and things like that. And so I started going into it. And then as we were talking, it was like, wait a second, this is a lot deeper. First of all, not everyone has the same reaction to the apple. And then as you brought up too, it's not always needing to eat for energy. There's also not eating for energy, right? So, Cason, what we want to start with is what's happening to your body when you eat, what's happening to your body when you don't eat, which one's giving you more energy. Can you start with that?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, what's happening when we eat and how all this is processing. I just want to start this whole thing out by saying, we know some stuff, we've done some science and studied this, but, when you really dive in and look deeper, we really don't know, because there's always a, outlier. There's always something that changes our what we thought we knew. But to the best of my knowledge, and I think to the best of the cutting edge science knowledge, you can break down eating and not eating into two categories. It's called the anabolic state and the catabolic state. So when we eat, we're in the anabolic state or the fed state, right? Our body is then using that food that we eat to break it down and make energy out of it. Like you mentioned in the beginning, it's all about energy, right? So how well we're metabolizing that food has everything to do with how much energy we have. And then the opposite or the converse is the catabolic state. And that is the non-fed state or the fasted state. And so we're either in one of those states or the other. After we eat, when we eat a substance, it usually takes about 12 hours to burn through all of that food that we ate and then the stored food that we have in our body or, you might have heard of glycogen. Our liver stores sugar, right, which is glycogen. And then it takes about 12 hours to burn through all that stored sugar because we're using that stored sugar in our liver for energy. I think we'll get into that a little bit more down the line here. But after 12 hours, then we're in the catabolic state. So now our body has to go into a different metabolism and it has to start using things like fat, our own adipose, to break down fat and turn that into energy. So, yeah, I think that kind of answers your question about what it's like to be eating and not eating.
Right. Yes. No. Okay. So obviously, this is a timing thing, right? Because we're talking about the 12 hours, like you said, and then also depending on where your metabolism, what you're using for that energy. So timing, right? Fasting and not fasting, right? That's one of those common things these days.
Yeah. When we use fasting for performance enhancement, for optimizing our energy, it's all about timing, right? And then that breaks down. Well, our body in general is all about timing. We're on rhythms, circadian rhythms, cycles, Sleep wake cycle is the most famous cycle, popular cycle. Like we have to have it. And so the fed and non-fed state are in that rhythm as well. And that has everything to do with our gut and our liver and every organ in our body and how it's running on that rhythm, right? So, but back to timing, it's all about the amount of time. So when you stop eating and then you eat again, you're going through an amount of time. Now you can stop eating and then prolong that not eating again for a longer amount of time to utilize some different metabolism from that non-fed state, where you're in a catabolic state, and you can gain some benefit from that with energy, where your mind and body run a little bit more efficiently. For some people, everybody's different.
And that's just that the body is not using the energy for breaking down food or things like that. Instead, it's using it to give you energy. That's where the healing comes in and all of that as well, but for energy purposes.
Yep. Lots of different theories there. One that really makes sense to me is, and we've all had this experience. Like we eat a really heavy meal, like let's say we have a big old breakfast, right? Some pancakes and eggs and bacon, and then we have a donut afterwards, right? And we're stuffed. We got a lot of sugar, right? We got we'll get into this in a little bit, protein, carbohydrates, and fats, but a lot of carbohydrates, right? And now, it was really good, but if we wanted to go write a paper or focus on a presentation, or focus with a patient or whatever we're doing, get a job done at our work, and we're like, we're like crashing, we can't even focus. Our metabolism is working to break down all that food that we ate. So one theory that really makes sense to me in the fasting world, in the non-fed state, is if we need to focus on a project or work or writing a paper or a book or whatever it may be that you're doing, and we haven't eaten, our body doesn't have to use that energy to break down the food. It can use that energy for our brain,
Yep.
and we can focus more properly.
That makes complete sense. And it also makes complete sense why we get tired after eating. Like you said, I mean, the body's just taking all of that energy and it needs to break down the food that we just ate. So very interesting. Okay, cool. So then after timing, right, another big factor I know we talked about was the food quality and how that relates to energy.
Yep. So that's all about food quality. And that's where that example I just gave of that huge breakfast, there's this thing called the Standard American Diet, right? And the acronym to that is SAD, which is quite fitting because our food in this country, in America especially, is sad. It's made in a lab. It's made by food scientists to stimulate our brain, not our gut, our brain, so that we want it, right? We're addicted to it and we crave it. And so this gets into food quality. So there's timing, right? There's the fed and the non-fed state. And then you always have to eat, right? You're going to have to eat to survive. So now when you do eat, now we need to talk about food quality, right? And this has everything to do with, the breakdown of the food, which we'll get into in a second, but the quality of the food. Like, is the farmer that's growing this corn, let's say, using a GMO seed, a genetically modified organism seed? This plays into the quality of the food. This can play into the how our body uses that food. It doesn't bode well for us from what we've seen, right? Then is the farmer spraying that corn, as an example, with a herbicide or pesticide or biocide, like Roundup, and then how that on that food, in that food, affects our body and our metabolism. And then that's a plant, and then you have the animal, the bacon that we're eating. Is that pig being fed GMO corn, which has that Roundup sprayed on it, and the genetic modified organism, the DNA messed with in it, and then now we eat that bacon, which is that, right? So. Right. The quality of the protein. So it all has to do with, when it comes to plants, well, I guess it really all starts with the plants, because the animals are eating the plants, right?
Right.
So,
The soil, right? Asprey
yeah,
always gets big into that
and
soil,
soil.
yeah.
Yeah. And Dr. Gundry, I was just going to say, he says it's not what you eat, it's what you ate.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
soil health, and our soil right now is so depleted with nutrients, micronutrients. So,
Right.
yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And that's something, once again, we'll get into when we get into supplements and things like that, with like ion biome,
Mm-hmm.
and the wild health, with that soil depletion, ways that you can overcome that and
Mm-hmm.
help, avoid those issues, or at least, yeah, once again, overcome it no matter what's going on. So like you said, so food quality, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
talking, non-toxic or low toxins, right? The local local grown, right? The local
Yep.
farmers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Organic. That's why
Yep.
farm to table is such a big thing these
Yep.
days, right?
Yep. Yeah. Know your food. This just gets to like going to a local farmer's market and talking to the people that are selling the produce and asking them questions, like, do you guys grow this, or where do you get these green peppers, and do you spray anything on them? And, just being curious.
Yep. No, that makes complete sense. And I try and always think of, some analogies and ways to understand it. But, the one that I keep going back to with the food and what we're taking in, and when you talk about either toxins or something in that food that's not natural, right? These GMOs,
Yep.
it's kind of like when you take, a Microsoft program and try and load it up onto your Apple, right? So like the Mac,
Mm-hmm.
it figures it out, it gets it up there, but
Mm-hmm.
it's all jumbled and it's all a big mess. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard for the program to be
Mm-hmm.
able to break that down and understand it. And once again, it can figure it out, right? Our body
Yep.
can figure it out, but it takes a lot more time and energy. Then we have to go through and clean that whole program up or that page up. And so it's really just, it's programs, right? If
Yep.
we're putting something in that our body doesn't understand or isn't used to, it's going to take more energy to break that down or to use it
Mm-hmm.
into transfer it into energy. And then over time, that continued extra energy or the toxins that is then messing up the program, right? Putting
Yep.
a bug
Yep.
in the computer program.
Yep.
Eventually over time, that computer program's so slow, and eventually our computers don't even work, right? They crash
Yep.
because it's just too much.
Yep. We
And
can't. We have no energy. It's like loading and loading and loading. It won't work. That's a great analogy.
yeah, awesome. Okay,
Yep.
cool. So then the next one, and actually real quick with food quality, there is a good, better, best, right? I mean,
Yep.
we're not sitting here saying, look, everything you get has to be organic, right? Everything you get has to be natural. Once again, we can, it's about balance. We're not always going to be able to get that top quality food, but if majority of the time, or if we're conscious and aware of it, making those choices, then the times when we don't, are mitigated and maybe not as much damage is done.
100%. We're living in the world that we're in today, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
we do only have certain accessibility to food, right? Now, not everybody has their own farm and takes care of their own cattle, and
One day we're
exactly
getting there. Yeah.
right. We are because we want to know, you and I, what's in our food,
Right.
and that's a whole nother responsibility.
Right.
But we've put together lists at Life Strength, like good, better, best, and we've got lists and handouts and little clickables, that show like healthy food or junk food for healthy
Yeah, I
people.
love that one. Yeah. Yep.
And there's products out there like Siete comes to mind. That the brand Siete, they make cassava flour chips, and so there's ways to navigate the world that we're in now.
Right.
And so I don't buy all my food at the farmer's market, but
Right.
if we can try
Right.
to understand and utilize that food, then we're giving ourselves a better chance. Like you said, the body knows how to digest that more adequately than it does a genetic modified organism.
Yep. Okay, cool. And then it also gets into even, depending on, right, like I know, like an avocado, for example, you don't need to buy an avocado organic, right, because
Yeah.
it's got a certain
Yeah.
covering on it, right, or, a banana, so certain things like that. So once again, it's learning that, understanding that, and that's what we'll get into, over time with these conversations. But like you said, so there's a good, better, best. Food quality is a big thing, and that's going to impact it. So then the next one that we've got on the list is the balance of macronutrients. Okay, so can you explain that to me a little more?
Yeah, so nutrients, I think again, this goes back to your apple and coffee idea where we had to like back this up a few steps to get to the basics.
Right.
And so the basics of nutrients there's three basic nutrients. There's proteins, there's fats, and there's carbs.
The
right?
macronutrients, right? Those.
Yep,
I'm sorry,
yep.
just
Yeah, you could say macro because they're big. So they're big nutrients, right?
Okay.
Protein, fats, and carbs. And out of those protein, fats, and carbs come micronutrients, which are our vitamins and our minerals.
Gotcha.
The things that our body needs to have to have a proper biochemistry. Like there's no biochemistry, which is our cellular function in our body, without nutrition. So there's no biochemistry without nutritional biochemistry. But, this all gets into how well we're breaking down the food that we're eating,
Right.
And
right.
I was thinking the other day, actually, Jay, about the coffee and coffee gets a bad rap. It gets a really bad rap because of caffeine, and everybody using it as a stimulant. And I was like, well, is it actually the coffee, or is it that nobody sits down on their couch, gets a book, relaxes and drinks their coffee in the morning? They're making, coffee on the go, chugging it down to wake up, to get to a job that they probably hate, and it's just this go, go, go. Anyway, I'm off topic, but
No.
yeah. So there's a whole mindset to this as well.
Yep. So with that, like we said, with the macronutrients, there's three of them, right? And so we're talking. Let's talk carbs first, right? So what are carbs?
Okay. So carbohydrates are typically starches. All starches means is a combined sugar, right? Two or more sugar molecules put together. Okay. And so again, this has to be broken down, and I think we'll probably have to do another video about digestion and how optimally we're breaking these foods down.
Yeah, we'll get into the gut health and the microbiome and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, the enzymes and how they function. So so carbs are sugar. They're starches, like I said, and then our body has to break those down. And there's a whole bunch of them. Glucose is probably the most famous. You've probably heard of glucose, and that's your blood glucose, right?
Right.
And so after you eat that starch, it gets broken down into sugar, and that sugar then is a big generator of energy. Right? You've seen a kid that gets a candy bar loaded with sugar and they go nuts, right?
Right.
That's a real thing. Their body is burning off that energy from that sugar.
Okay, so, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's sugar. And that creates this thing called ATP, which is, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. That's throwing off all this energy, right? For our mitochondria to use in our cell.
Okay. So then that's how the carb's working, right?
That's how it's working after it's digested. Yep.
Okay. And that makes sense. And, this is where, once again, bringing it back to that apple and how we were talking about the sugar was what was given the energy, just to kind of, inform everyone, and we'll go deeper into that. But then, it was the fiber with the sugar that was kind of then slowing it down. So it wasn't necessarily, because once again, if we're talking about the sugar from the apple or the carb is giving you the energy, it's not that simple, because, then why don't you just eat candy, or even why don't you just have apple juice, right? Yeah. But, then it's missing those pieces like the fiber and the starches that are slowing things down. And that's where this kind of got even deeper. So carbs, right? We're looking at mostly sugar, or mostly starches, and then sugar, all different kinds of sugar.
Yep.
So now, what are some benefits of carbs? I mean, if sugar's so bad, how could there be a benefit to a carb?
Well, God made it. It's in food, it's a real thing. So nothing is good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Shakespeare said that. So this gets into the standard American diet. It's not that the sugar's bad. It's that they're loading it in all of these foods, like a boxed food or a packaged food that you're getting from the store. It might be a potato chip, which is a carbohydrate, right? But then that potato chip has added high fructose corn syrup in it to make it sweet, like with the barbecue sauce that's on it or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it goes deep because that high fructose corn syrup is a different type of sugar that tastes sweet, that makes you want to eat it, that your body has to process. So now you're just, loaded with sugar in a potato chip, right? So that goes back to like the pancake and the breakfast analogy. We're overburdened with this high sugar diet.
So that's where they're bad, but so the good to the carb, right?
Yep. So the good is we need sugar, we need sugar. I think you just made a Instagram post about going keto, and you were keto for like a year and a half or something like that. And it, after a while, stuff started happening in your body that you didn't like, So I'm not saying it's because you weren't eating carbs, but I'm saying there's a time for carbohydrates. There's a time to timing, back to timing, a time to utilize proper carbohydrate, to refuel those glycogen stores, not just relying on one of that, like fasting, for example, not just relying on fasting for energy, but relying on the anabolic state for energy with the proper protein, fats, and carbs.
I got you. Well, there you go. And that I heard that part right there with the refuel the glycogen, right? So that's the carbs need to do that, right? It's even why when we were on keto, we'd still have a little bit of carbs in the evening time.
Yep.
And as I've continued to, understand more and more, I've even looked into then like cyclical keto, right?
Yes.
Which then can get even into more carbs than the normal, right?
Yep.
And putting yourself in and out of that, and that's that metabolic flexibility, right?
There you go.
That I don't want to try and get too deep into that, but it's that, right? And so clearly, that glycogen store, for example, is one of the big benefits of why we need carbs. Right?
Yep. Okay. And then there's a whole nother ball game there with timing when you're eating your carbs. If you're an exerciser, or if you're a high performance, athlete, do you eat your carbs before? Like I played football in college, and it was always carb load before the game. But man, about halfway through our warm up, I would crash. I was just tired. I was lacking energy because the sugar, I burned through all the sugar, right, from that pregame meal. So there's a way to eat the carb, with timing, and this gets back into knowing your biology, knowing what's in your blood, knowing what works, right? I think we're going to get to a little bit of that with Be Your Own Scientist.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the mechanism that's going on with the carbs and energy, right? What do we have going on there?
Well, that's the ATP, right? Okay. That's where that glucose is coming into the cell and from the blood, right? After it's digested. And then as it gets into the cell, it's going to turn on the burners. It's going to turn, it's like gas in your car, So it's going to start fueling you with energy to run all the processing of like a muscle contraction.
Okay. Okay. So that's what's going on. So like you said, it's the ATP, and it's basically given that it's filling up the cell, right? And that's where the energy is coming from. That's the mechanism. Okay.
Yep. But a lot of people have too much of that sugar, too much of that glucose. And so the cell says, no, we don't want any sugar. And that gets into diabetes and insulin resistance and prediabetes. Yep.
Okay. All right. And once again, that's another one we'll dive deeper into, but it's why we said we got to take a step back with this Apple conversation because, people need to understand first what their body type is like and how they're going to react.
You might not need the apple.
Yeah. Exactly.
You might need to skip the apple until dessert.
That's it. So you do need to eat them, right? We've got that. And so carbs aren't bad, right? It's depending on, first understanding yourself. But carbs definitely aren't bad is what I got out of this part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Then it goes into quality again. I call it smart carbs versus, non-smart carbs. I don't want to call anybody out, but, you know, you want to eat smart carbs. You want to eat things like prebiotic fibers that or starches or resistant starches like plantains and white rice that's organic and cooked and then cooled. You know, sweet potatoes, those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, and so this, you know, we're going to get into the proteins and fats, but I know, you know, a big thing that I'm seeing more and more of is where they talk about making sure when you're eating your meal, you're eating your proteins first, right? Things like that. And I don't want to ruin the next segment on proteins, but it's like that, right? It's that timing that's helping then break up the protein. So with that, let's get into protein. So what's a protein?
So protein is a bunch of amino acids, right, put together to make a longer molecule, and that's a protein. And so it's protein. Actually, I think it's the Greek word is proteos, and proteos means primary. So protein means primary, and it's responsible for the structure and the function of our body. So muscles are proteins, right? And typically we get a lot of protein from eating animal muscles, right? Like beef or chicken or lamb or, you know, fish. Those are the tissue, the muscle tissue of that animal. And so, so when we eat that, then we're breaking that down with digestion to amino acids. And those amino acids are responsible for everything, you know, the structure and the function. So enzymes and hormones and muscle fibers and skin and bone and hair and, you know, deeper and deeper into our physiology and what that needs.
I see. So you're saying, so it's the amino acids, right, is what makes up protein. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yep.
And so it's
they're chains. They're like chains.
Okay. Yep. All right. And so then from that protein, like you said, you know, just to show how important proteins are, and as you mentioned, you know, the wording of it alone, you know, primary, but it's making up everything in our body.
Structure and function. Without proteins, we don't function.
Okay.
Or we're not a structure. We're not erect. You know, we can't stand up right. We can't type with our fingers, you know, because those are muscles. So it's everything.
Well, so I think you just touched on what are the benefits of protein, right? It's the function of our body, basically, is what's going on.
Yep. So, and this is where nutrition comes in, because as we replenish that protein with high quality, you know, animal protein, or, you know, if you're vegan, plant protein, you know, you got to be mindful and know what you're doing with that, with animals as well. Then now you're giving the building blocks back to your body for structure and function.
Gotcha. Okay. Huge. And so let's see, when you eat protein, you know, what's happening to your body, right? What's it doing to your body? And so as you said, go ahead.
So that's a great question. It gets complicated because, you know, like I said at the beginning, we think we have a lot figured out, but the more you know, the more you know you don't know. Well, protein can be utilized. There's a process in metabolism that can turn it into ATP. So proteins can actually turn into ATP. You know, you always hear.
So with the carbs, you were talking about how it's filling up the ATP, or it's filling up the cell and giving it ATP that way. But with the protein, you're saying it's actually can turn into ATP.
Yep. So that can increase your sugar as well. Your blood sugar.
Interesting.
Right? Gets complicated, but the point is that like this is where quality's first, quantity, you know, is second. You hear everybody talk about, like, if you're going to eat a steak, you eat a steak the size of your fist. There's all sorts of calculations out there about your body weight, and then the ratio of your body weight to the grams of proteins. You know, we don't need to get into all that, but that amount of protein, that quality of protein, is essential to give your body what it needs to make things like enzymes and hormones and neurotransmitters and all sorts of things.
Okay. And so now that now that you mentioned, or you went right into protein, being able to make ATP, which I'm understanding ATP is energy, right? Is that ATP is energy, or tell me a little more about ATP real quick.
ATP is what we know as the energy driver of the cell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot more to it. I don't think it pays to get deeper into that. But,
okay. But it's the energy driver of the cell is what ATP is.
And so I should also say with protein that it can turn into a sugar type substance it can turn into driving the ATP of the cell.
Okay.
But the main thing that it's doing is as it's getting broken down into amino acids, these amino acids are now available for the cell to take and to be catalysts for cellular actions that the cell needs to take in its function, right? Or I can't remember the exact amino acids, but adenine, guanine, tyrosine, maybe. There's 4 that make up our DNA, our genes. Those amino acids are essential to create our genetic makeup, right? And so the nucleus of the cell, which is in the center of the cell, that sucker has the code to make more proteins. Like nucleus makes proteins. That all has to do with mRNA and DNA. So that's where protein comes very important, because those amino acids are, like I said, building blocks to make more proteins. Like an enzyme, the body might need more of this certain enzyme. So that cell is going to be programmed to make more of that enzyme. The body has us way outsmarted. Like it's way smarter than us.
Yeah.
And so we don't know. I mean, there's 100 trillion cells in our body. Some scientists are saying most of those cells, all of them besides red blood cells, have a nucleus. That means all of those nucleus are constantly, every moment, every day, turning on, turning off protein production, right? That's coming from amino acids. That's coming from the protein that we ate, or the breakdown of the proteins in our body to make more of it. So
I see. Okay. And this is where, I'm not going to get into the optimal aminos, right? The essential aminos, right? And taking those for muscles. But so the mechanism, right, of how that protein is turning into energy, like you said, just sum that up.
Well, I guess the best way to sum that up is that amino acid that's getting broken down is going to be used for a function in the body.
Gotcha. Yep. And then from there, it can go many different ways.
Many different ways. Said. We need it. We need it. It's primary. It's responsible for the structure and the function. So I think that's the main takeaway for the mechanism.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay. Perfect. So do we need to eat protein? That one. Yeah. I think we touched on that, right? That's the core to everything.
Do. Yeah. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Perfect. So now jumping into the last of the 3 macronutrients, and talking about keto, and I'm sure everyone's heard the benefits of. But so, what are fats?
Yeah. Jason? Okay. So fats are lipids. Lipid is a fat, and it's like an oil, right? So you've all seen when you take a glass of water, and you take some olive oil. And you put that olive oil in the water, that olive oil will float on the water, right? So, or if you spill the olive oil on your olive oil is a fat, okay, a lipid. If you spill your olive oil on the table, it's got that real slimy, slippery kind of feel, right?
Right. Yep.
So, gosh, what are fats? They're triglycerides. So triacylglycerides. So again, it's another breakdown. When we eat them in the triglyceride form, and those are getting broken down into smaller particles, right? This gets real complicated. I don't need to get into all that, but the basis of this with fats and the way that I think of them, this all goes back to the cell, right? If our cell is functioning optimally, then our the cells make up a tissue. Then our tissues are functioning optimally. Tissues make up an organ, right? Then our organs are functioning optimally. And then organs make up organ systems, right? So cardiovascular, the neurologic system, list goes on and on. Then those organ systems make up an organism. That's us, a human. So if we take this back to the cell and that cell is functioning optimally, well, we would need healthy fats because every cell has what's called a phospholipid bilayer. So that phospholipid bilayer is fat. And so the way that the cell membrane works, and the membrane of the cell is extremely fascinating. If you've ever read any of Bruce Lipton's work in The Biology of Belief, it's fascinating what the cell membrane does. It's like a radio receiver, basically, because it has all these antennas on it, right? But a full cell, it's a three-dimensional object in our body, is loaded, all encapsulated with phospholipids, right? And so those are essential for how that cell is allowing things to come in, like glucose, because there's transporters in that phospholipid membrane that need to be basically they need to because the lipids are a fat, that membrane needs to be liking fat, so it can fit in that thing. Some things don't like fat, they like water. And so it's complicated, but let me get back to the question.
No, you're nailing it. You're diving deep into it, right? So that's great. So that makes sense. So like you said, the cell is needing that lipid, right? And that lipid's coming from the fat, right? And that's what's having that cell complete,
making the membrane. So that's one thing that the lipids do. Like they're going to get broken down, and the cell automatically is going to replenish and regenerate and renew its membrane, right, with healthier fats. Or it's gonna go through a cell death and die off, and then make a new one and make a new thing of itself, repopulate, and that's now going to use this healthy fat that we're eating to make a new cell. So the healthier our cells are, which is a direct result of how healthy the fats that we're eating are, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing that they do. Lipids, fats. And the other thing is that they do is they get broken down as well. So they can get broken down. And when we are in let's say a catabolic state, right? A non-fed state, that means our body's breaking itself down to make more energy. Excuse me. It goes through this thing called lipolysis, which is fat breakdown, right? That's burning fat, right? You're breaking down adipose to make more fat available for the body to be used as fuel. So that's going to go turn into ATP. There's that ATP again for energy. That's a process called gluconeogenesis. We have to have it, right? It's a metabolism. Everybody has it, right? And the whole keto thing was like, okay, well, we know that we can break down fat for fuel. Let's start eating fat for fuel and use that fat that we ate without protein or carbs, right? Without anything that could possibly increase our glucose, which has to do with insulin, which is the hormone that ties into glucose and makes it go in the cell. So we're going to just eat fat now, and now that can turn into fuel and energy, ATP. So, maybe you've heard of medium chain triglycerides, right? A triglyceride is a fat, right? There's short chain, medium chain, and long chain. And those medium chain, they go right to the liver when we ingest them. And then they could get turned into ketones in the liver. And so that can give our brain some energy, right? So that's where this whole keto diet kind of sparked from.
I see. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That was, you went deep and that's
sorry.
awesome. So no, but it really starts to pull everything together now. Right. And I can see why keto then, just the complexity of that and all the different ways that it was working on that,
Yeah.
you could really start to see, okay, that's why fat is so big for our body for energy.
One more thing I got to say with fat is, vitamins. This is where when we break down to the micronutrients, which we're not going to get into today, vitamins and minerals. There's fat soluble vitamins and there's water soluble vitamins. So some vitamins like A, D, E, and K are fat soluble. So we have to have fat to absorb them, right? Because there's that water loving and fat loving, And so if we don't have fat, then proper fat, adequate fat, or our fat, the quality of our fats that we're eating aren't optimal. They're these denatured, highly processed fats. Then we might not be absorbing A, D, E, and K optimally. That has everything to do with a whole bunch of other stuff like bone development and how acid or basic our blood is, just a whole slew of things. And so fat then is essential for that. So fats are so important, just like proteins are so important, just like carbohydrates are so important, but the three of those working in the majesty of the miracle of our body is extremely important.
Well, so and I understand, that makes, when you said it that way, with the body needing to be able to absorb the fat, but also then that it really reiterates why the importance of the quality of that, or the natural, right? Compared to the manufactured. When they're manufacturing something, mean, they're not putting all the things in, and your body can't understand. Your program can't comprehend it fully.
There you go. I mean, imagine like Asprey says, I can't remember what he said, but like when I started the Bulletproof diet way back in the day, he was like, you want to start eating healthy fats so you can replenish the membrane, the cell membranes of your body, the 100 trillion of them, with these healthy fats, right? Mm-hmm. And that's going to take some time to recycle and repopulate all that, right? And so imagine if you had this sick fat with denaturing tails, like these fats have these tails, that they carry around, and they're just sick, they're denatured, and your cell is trying to use them for the membrane. And Bruce Lipton calls that the brain of the cell. It's actually picking up frequencies, right? And so you got these sick fats, right? These sick cells, and now you're trying to take in information, and your body just is not working properly because it's sick, right? And you're eating sick food, And so that's where food is medicine, and super powerful.
No, that makes complete sense. And then just one more thing on that, so that now I understand more why when I take vitamin D, for example, I need to take it with K2, right? Or something along those lines. Is that connected to that?
Well, Jay, again, the more we know, the more we don't know, Okay. And so I think we should save that for another podcast.
Okay. But, all right. Yeah.
But what I'm learning is we need to get vitamin D from the sun.
Yeah.
We really need to get vitamin D from the sun and how it's found in food naturally. And then that vitamin D, K2, and all that stuff in between, it's balanced out perfectly.
It's funny how nature works.
Yeah.
Nothing is wasted, right? And we have everything we need if we really look around. So
yeah.
Awesome.
I guess what I'll say on that is like the whole vitamin D story might be wrong.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the sun's bad, so I don't know if we even want to get into that conversation.
Again, if the sun is bad and we're not in it enough, then our vitamin D isn't rocking, then what's that going to do to our health?
Yeah, just to reinforce, the sun is not bad. We're joking on that one, but okay, cool. So the mechanism, right, of how the fat is giving us energy.
Okay, that's called gluconeogenesis. Okay, so that's called gluconeogenesis. That's where we flip into a different metabolism, and we start. This can happen from the catabolic state, right, the fasted, non-fed state, or this can happen from the ketogenic diet that we're using to use fat for fuel. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes. No. So that, I mean, you summed it up in one big word: gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis. So it's actually making glucose. Genesis is making glucose.
Okay.
through cellular mechanism. Fascinating.
I see.
Fascinating that the body does it.
Yeah. Okay. So you do need to eat fats. We don't want to avoid fats. The low fat foods, that was a big thing, and all of that.
Oh, that was bad. That was bad. Yep.
Yeah.
They took
Yeah.
butter away from us. Oh,
Yeah.
and egg yolks. Oh,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was bad.
Okay. Okay.
Didn't help. Did not
No,
help.
no. Well, that goes down a whole nother rabbit hole that we'll
Yep.
eventually get into as we continue this conversation. So that's why we're starting here. But okay, so with all of those, right? And I know once again we're saying that no two humans are alike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you can't give us exacts for everyone, but the balance of a meal, right, with the proteins and the carbs and the fats, can you give us some general ideas of that,
Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, I would say eat all of them together. Like that should be your meal.
Mm-hmm.
We're finding now that, with this whole carnivore craze that, some people do well with just a piece of meat, and using that as their primary source in that moment of eating during the day. I think that bodes well with history. And, if a tribe was able to, hunt and kill a buffalo, then they're going to eat that buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to, go searching for berries after they killed the buffalo. That's just an added bonus,
Oh, I see.
so
Yep.
they're going to eat the meat, right? Because it's primary. So, I say generally speaking, eat the three together: protein, fat, and carbs. We didn't get into fiber. Fiber is another topic. It doesn't fit into the nutrient profile
The macronutrient,
of protein, fats, and carbs. It's a bit of both, depending on what it is. And so, you get a nice organic grass-fed, steak or burger that's the size of your fist, and you get a nice helping of some steamed broccoli, and then you throw some grass-fed organic raw butter on that, and maybe some a sweet potato on the side.
But so size wise, like you said, so your fist, and so is the carbs, right? The sweet potato, is that about the same size, or does it matter?
Did you work out? Or
Right.
are you going to work out?
Right.
How much have you done today? Did you walk on your walking desk treadmill thingy?
Mm-hmm.
Did you do some push-ups in between your Zoom calls?
Right.
Like what did you do? That plays into it. So generally speaking, Jay, I would say, have the protein about the size of your carb, serving wise.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the fat, of course, like you said, that's more of a topping. That's more of, I know you've mentioned a couple times, I'm gonna steal this from you, that's what we're cooking in, right? So that's typically
that's what we're cooking in, and then that's what we're using our white rice as a vehicle for, right? So my white rice is a vehicle for grass-fed butter and sea salt, and then my sweet potato is a vehicle for both of those as well.
Right. Exactly.
And now we're talking about healthy eating, and it's just like mind blown because everybody thinks healthy eating is disgusting, but this is delicious.
No, are you kidding me? And then we throw some honey on there.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe a little honey roasted sweet potato, thingies. I don't know.
Yeah, no, well, and it all gets back to food quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
The big thing that I keep seeing over and over again, and what you've reinforced, right? Carbs are sugars. Sugars are not bad. Sugars our body needs, but it's the natural. And then, of course, it's, the amount of, right? But we can have sweets, right? And they, as long as they're combined, and once again, that's where, when you're eating it in a complete meal. Yep. And once again, this gets to the whole, with insulin and diabetes and things like that. We'll touch on, in another episode, but where we're talking, when you're having it in the complete meal, then it's not having such an extreme insulin spike, right?
There you
and
go.
The sugar is not.
There you go. Yeah. We're eating real whole food. Dr. Kate always says, "Jerf, just eat real food." I mean, a bag of Doritos, I'm sorry, is not real food. It's not.
Yeah.
No. Imagine giving a bag of Doritos to somebody in the 1800s, and they their reaction would be like, can you imagine? Like they
Yeah.
would be like, what is this? Whoa!
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Well, and imagine their body wouldn't react that great of a way, which, should make you think. I mean, if their body is our body, then
well, they'd be, one bag of Doritos, they'd be rocking. Everything's just pumping. That's going to be like an out of body experience for them,
Yep. Yep.
But
Mm-hmm.
let's not give them more bags of Doritos.
All right, cool. So with this case and going through those, the one that we've talked about, many times, but awareness, right? Awareness is one of those big points.
This is everything. I mean, this is everything. This gets into the placebo and do you think what you're eating is healthy? And do you perceive yourself as being healthy? Do you perceive yourself as being old? This perception and awareness of that is everything. Mm-hmm. Everything. That's actually making some proteins, all of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So being aware of what we're eating, and then, like you said, being aware of how that's, how that's interacting with your body. And then, like you said, perception is reality, right? Yep. That's where placebo effect comes in. Yep. That's where, they can give these medications that's really just a sugar pill to somebody, but they think it's something else. And then awareness has that same chemical reaction.
Yep, absolutely. But, with all that being said, this toxic burden that is being laid in our food and in our air, it does weigh on us,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's awareness of that as well.
Yep. Okay. And so with that awareness, Cason, you said in a phrase that I know I'm going to overuse, until I die, because I just love it so much and it makes so much sense. But be your own scientist, right? Yeah. And trial and error. So talk to us a little bit about that saying.
Well, it's not mine. I stole that from someone. I don't remember where. Uh-huh. But yeah, dude, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility. It's not our doctors. It's not our health coaches. It's not our wife's responsibility, or our girlfriends or our moms. It's ours. Mm-hmm. And so that is what I mean. You have to be your own scientist. You have to trial and error. Mm-hmm. You have to try this keto diet if you want. You have to try this carb cycling if you want. You have to try loading up with starches after a workout and not having them before a workout. You've got to be your own scientist. You got to muster up some courage, do some research, right? Find some friends that have tried it before, ask some questions, and get to know yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, no, and with all this stuff, we're going into qualitative, right? And how we feel, right? So measuring it through a qualitative feeling, right? You're eating that, you're eating that apple, and you're getting some energy, but then are you crashing later, right? Like you can just
you're sleeping on the keyboard.
Yeah, exactly, right? So then okay, that wasn't the reaction that Jay's talking about when he's like, well, sometimes instead of drinking coffee, I'm eating an apple. My body does not function that way, and so you just got to operate that way. But it's being aware and then testing, and not just reading what the latest influencer says on Instagram, but going through what you feel, because we have an abundance of data and research, and science is science until it's not science, right? And until it's proven wrong. And that's one thing that's a consistent is things keep changing. I mean, quantum physics, that's going to be that'll blow everything out of the water. But it's that feeling, right? Yeah. It's testing, and then from that feeling, and being your own scientist and feeling, then you can also level that up, right, with data and labs, right? Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about being your own scientist from the quantitative?
Sure, yeah. So the quantitative, don't guess, test, right? You can't measure what you don't. Wait, what's that one? You can't manage what you don't measure.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So that's where, I've taken a little bit of a punch on the chin lately, because I used to be this whole, feel it, create it with how you're feeling it. But measurement and leveling up and looking at the data where you're at, that has some great value to it. So yeah, be your own scientist and in getting your blood glucose measured, your fasting blood glucose and your A1C and what your albumin levels are. And these things that are in our blood that we have a lot of science that have researched and looked at this stuff, so we can up level. And so then when we combine the two, how did you describe it? The quantitative,
Yep. And the qualitative,
and the qualitative,
right?
And so we're feeling the results, and we know that we have more energy, and then it matches up with the measurements. Right. Now, dude, next level.
Yeah. Well, and with that, I just want to go a little bit more into the measurements. You're talking blood work is a big one, right?
Yeah.
So being able to get your blood work done before, so like literally, as soon as you can, before getting into whatever adjustments you then make. So you got a baseline, right? But blood work is one of those big ones. Can you talk about?
Yeah, I just got done with a course from my man, Dr. Brian Walsh, in blood chemistry interpretation, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. Again, this is why I can say that we don't have a clue.
Yeah,
we really don't have a clue, but we do have a clue on some things, and so we can use those things as a baseline. Right.
Perfect.
And it can show us where we might need more B6, as a micronutrient, or we might need to eat more beef liver, or we might not, or take beef liver supplements,
Yeah.
So, blood work is where I'm at, because there's no more validated research than the blood.
Right. Yep. No, that makes complete sense. So, okay, cool. So like you said, be your own scientist. That's from a feeling perspective and from a data perspective. And then no matter, all of it is from a trial and error perspective.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome, man. We went over a lot. We're right under an hour, which, I'm glad we were able to keep that there. But at the same time, just incredibly valuable information. Obviously, nutrition is a crucial piece to being a high performing human, right? In both work and life. Yeah. And so, deeply appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise in this area, Cason. It helped myself for sure. I just continue to learn more and more as I talk with you. You have such a great way of taking things and breaking it down and then explaining it. So, that helped myself. Hopefully, everyone watching got a better understanding and got to, really realize why we need to look further into these things and how they can then optimize their nutrition. Right. So then they can get the most out of work, out of relationships, out of life. So thank you again, Cason, so much for being on here. And real quick, Cason, how can people find you? How do they, learn more and be able to get these types of interactions on a regular basis?
Well, I spend all my time at Life Strength Health Center with Dr. Cade Copeland. That's here in Naples, Florida. And so that's probably where I'd send people to first, right? Give us a call, follow us on Instagram, YouTube.
Great YouTube channel. Instagram's growing. The YouTube channel is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say that's the big one. My book's on Amazon, Wired to Heal. It breaks down the whole nutrition thing that we just talked about in more depth on there.
It goes deep.
Yeah, deep.
We didn't even touch the surface on that book, but yeah.
Yeah, and then that's just one of the sections. And then, I have an Instagram as well, Cason Lehman. I guess if you're in Naples, you can probably find me at Food and Thought.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I'm imagining a lot of people, and as we get deeper, into the blood work and understanding that, you are the guy that I would, tell everyone to go to for that. You guys are, off of the blood work, right, and everything at Life Strength. So, we can get more into that later. But thank you so much, Cason, for your time. Appreciate you, brother. Looking forward to talking more soon. And thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jay.